I met my husband at a 4th of July cookout in Nashville, Tennessee, in the summer of 1986. I was 28 years old, teaching 3rd grade at Riverside Elementary, and I had spent most of that afternoon hiding near the dessert table with a paper plate of potato salad, trying to avoid my friend Donna's attempts to set me up with her neighbor's son. He found me anyway. Not Donna's neighbor's son, but a man I had never seen before, tall, with dark hair going silver at the temples even then, and a way of laughing that made everyone around him want to laugh too. His name was Vincent. He had driven down from Chicago to visit his college roommate, and he was only in town for the weekend. He stayed for 3. I should have known, even then, that a man who could rearrange his own life so effortlessly would expect other people to rearrange theirs for him. But I was 28, and he was 32, and he called me every single night from Chicago for 4 months before he asked me to marry him over the phone, and then drove 11 hours straight to put a ring on my finger before I could change my mind. I said yes, standing in my kitchen in my bathrobe at 2 in the morning while my cat stared at us both like we had lost our minds. We married in April of 1987. I was 29 years old. Vincent's family was from Calabria, the southern tip of Italy, and his parents had come to America in the early 1960s with almost nothing. His mother, a small, sharp-eyed woman named Concetta, had raised 4 children in a 2-bedroom apartment in Chicago's Little Italy neighborhood, stretching every dollar until it screamed. She was proud. She was fierce. And she never stopped speaking Italian when she wanted to say something she did not want me to hear. At first, I assumed it was just habit. A first-generation family holding onto the language like a life raft. I had grown up in rural Kentucky, the daughter of a high school football coach and a woman who made the best cornbread in 3 counties. I had never heard Italian spoken in a home before. I thought it was beautiful, honestly, musical. I would sit at the dinner table during our visits to Chicago and listen to Concetta and Vincent talk, watching their hands move, and I would smile and pass the bread basket and feel warmly, pleasantly excluded, like a tourist who had wandered into a family's kitchen by accident and been given a seat out of good manners. It took me years to understand that I had been given that seat on purpose, that being seated just outside the conversation was not an accident but a design. I cannot give you a single moment when I knew. It was more like fog that thickens so gradually that you only realize you cannot see your hand in front of your face when you reach out for something and find nothing there. The first years of our marriage were good, or good enough that I did not question them. We bought a house in a suburb east of Nashville. Vincent worked in commercial real estate and was successful at it, which meant long hours and frequent travel and a level of financial comfort I had not grown up with. I kept teaching. I loved teaching. I loved the chaos of 8-year-olds learning to read, the way a child's face changes when a word suddenly becomes real to them, when letters stop being symbols and start being meaning. I had been a teacher for 5 years before I met Vincent, and I intended to be one for 30 more. But Vincent had other ideas, and he expressed them so gently, so reasonably, that I agreed to each one before I understood what I was agreeing to. The first idea was that I should take a leave of absence after our daughter was born in 1989. Just a year, he said, just to be with her while she's small. I agreed. The year became 2. The second idea was that when I was ready to go back, perhaps it made more sense to wait until our son started kindergarten, since we would save money on childcare and I would be home when they needed me. I agreed to that too. The years stacked up like dishes I kept meaning to put away. By the time both children were in school full-time, 7 years had passed since I had stood in front of a classroom, and Vincent said, gently, reasonably, that going back now would mean starting over almost from scratch. And was it really worth the disruption to the family's routine? I said no. I said no because by then I had begun to believe that my judgment about my own life was less reliable than his. This is the thing about living with someone who is very calm and very certain. After a while, their certainty starts to feel like wisdom, and your own doubts start to feel like weakness. Vincent was never cruel. He never shouted. He never called me names. He simply had a way of explaining the world back to me. Slowly and patiently, until my version of it disappeared and only his remained. I did not have a bank account in my own name until I was 53 years old. I want to say that plainly because it is the detail people find hardest to believe, and I understand why. It sounds impossible, but here is how it works. You start with a joint account because you are married, and that is what married people do. And then, every expense, every bill, every grocery run and school supply and car repair, all of it flows through that joint account, which means your husband always knows exactly what you spent and where and when. There is no accusation, no confrontation, just the occasional quiet question. What was this charge from Tuesday? Or, I thought we agreed to stick to the budget this month, said calmly, said reasonably, until you stop buying things without asking first, and then stop asking for things you suspect will get a quiet no, and then stop wanting things that are not already on the approved list. The children grew up and moved out. Our daughter went to college in North Carolina and married a kind man who teaches high school history. Our son works in Seattle now. Something in software that I still do not entirely understand despite his patient explanations. I was proud of them. I was proud of them the way you are proud of birds, when they finally fly, relieved and hollow at the same time, the nest suddenly enormous around you. By the time our son left for college in 2009, it was just Vincent and me in the house in the suburb east of Nashville, and Concetta driving down from Chicago twice a year to visit because she did not trust airplanes. It was Concetta's visits that finally changed everything, though not in the way I expected, and not right away. I had been hearing Italian in my own home for 22 years by then. Concetta and Vincent at the kitchen table after dinner, talking low and fast while I washed dishes 10 feet away. Concetta on the phone with Vincent, and his end of the conversation shifting the moment he saw me come into the room. The particular quality of silence that fell between them, sometimes when I appeared not guilty, exactly, but recalibrated, the way a radio sounds when someone adjusts the dial. I told myself I was imagining it. I had told myself that for a long time. But in the winter of 2010, I signed up for an Italian class at the community center 3 miles from our house. I did not tell Vincent. I told him I was taking a watercolor class on Thursday evenings, which was partly true. The watercolor class met on Thursdays, and I did attend it for the first 4 weeks before switching to Italian without mentioning the change. I paid for it in cash, which meant I had to plan ahead, taking small amounts from the grocery budget over several weeks, and that planning felt shameful and also clarifying. I was hiding something from my husband in my own home, and the thing I was hiding was the desire to understand what was being said around me. The instructor was a retired woman named Juliana, who had grown up in Rome and moved to Tennessee for reasons she never fully explained. She was patient with my accent and ruthless about my verb conjugations, and I loved every Thursday evening with a fierceness that surprised me. I was 52 years old, sitting in a folding chair under fluorescent lights, conjugating verbs in a language I had been hearing for 2 decades, and I felt more like myself than I had felt in years. I kept the class secret, and then I kept the second class secret, and the private tutoring sessions I started in 2013 with Juliana's former student, a young woman named Sophia, who charged $40 an hour and thought it was romantic that I was learning Italian to surprise my husband. It was not romantic. But I let her think so. Here is what I want to say to anyone who wonders why it took 3 years of classes before I felt confident enough to understand Concetta and Vincent's kitchen table conversations. Language is not just vocabulary and grammar. It is rhythm and speed, and the specific shorthand that 2 people build over a lifetime of talking to each other. Concetta and Vincent spoke the Calabrian dialect, not standard Italian, and they spoke it fast, the way people speak when they have no reason to be understood by outsiders. It took me 3 years to catch up to them. 3 years of Thursday evenings and Wednesday afternoons with Sophia and late nights with Italian podcasts, an earbud in one ear with the volume low while Vincent watched television in the next room. I understood my first complete sentence in the spring of 2013. Concetta was on the phone with Vincent. I was in the hallway. He was in the kitchen, standing at the counter, and she said, in dialect, that she worried he was throwing his life away staying with a woman who had no ambition and no family to speak of, and he said, also in dialect, that she was not wrong, but that leaving was complicated. I stood in the hallway for a long time after that. I did not cry. I want to be clear about that. I had been waiting, I think, without knowing I was waiting, and so when the confirmation finally came, it felt less like a wound and more like a key turning in a lock. Something opened. I was not sure yet what was on the other side of the door, But I knew the door was real now. I had not been imagining it. I did not confront him that night, or the next night, or the night after that. I kept going to my Italian class. I kept listening. I had spent 26 years in a house where I was always the person who did not understand, and I found that understanding, once I had it, required a period of adjustment, like eyes adjusting to a room after the lights come on. Over the following months, I heard more. Not a great revelation all at once, but accumulations, the way snow accumulates each flake unremarkable, but eventually you look out the window and everything is buried. I heard Concetta ask whether Vincent had looked into the property in Calabria, the family land that his uncle had left him, whether he had decided what to do with it yet. I heard Vincent say he was waiting until the situation here resolved itself. I heard Concetta say not to wait too long, that the property needed attention, that a man his age should be thinking about where he wanted to spend his later years. I heard Vincent agree. There was a woman. I am saying this plainly because I did not understand it plainly until the spring of 2016, nearly 30 years into our marriage. Her name came up in conversation twice before I understood that it was a woman's name and not a place. Mariella. Concetta knew about her. Had apparently known for some time, because the conversation I overheard in the kitchen in March of 2016 was not the conversation of a mother learning something for the first time, but the conversation of a mother checking in on something ongoing, something she had already accepted. I was 61 years old, standing in my own kitchen doorway, and I understood exactly what was being said around me. I went back to my bedroom and I sat on the edge of the bed and I thought about 29 years. I thought about the joint account and the watercolor class I had used as cover and the Thursday evenings with Juliana and the $40 an hour I had paid Sophia and the earbud in the dark hallway and the years of dishes and the career I had not returned to and the birds flying out of the nest. And everything I had agreed to, gently, reasonably, because it had been explained to me so calmly and so patiently that I had forgotten I was allowed to disagree. I did not cry. I had done my crying in small pieces over many years, I think, without labeling it for what it was. I made an appointment with an attorney named Patricia in downtown Nashville, not because I was certain yet of what I wanted to do, but because I had spent 29 years making decisions only after Vincent had explained them to me, and I wanted, for once, to walk into a room and find out what my options were before anyone had the chance to explain them away. Patricia was 63 and had been practicing family law for 30 years and wore reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck that she picked up and put down constantly throughout our conversation. She did not tell me what to do. She told me what I had a right to, which is not the same thing and is considerably more useful. She explained Tennessee's equitable distribution laws. She explained what 30 years of contribution to a household looked like in a court's eyes. She explained the difference between what I thought I was owed and what I could expect to receive, and the difference was smaller than I feared. I went home and I made dinner and I sat across the table from Vincent and he talked about a development project he was consulting on and I listened and nodded and understood, for the first time in my adult life, that I was not trapped. I want to explain that feeling because I think people expect it to feel triumphant, and it did not. It felt quiet. Like the moment after a very long noise stops, and you realize how much energy you had been spending simply absorbing it. I was not triumphant. I was tired, and I was clear, which is a combination I had not felt in longer than I could remember. I told Vincent on a Tuesday evening in October of 2016, not during a fight, because we did not fight, not as an accusation, because I was done explaining myself. I told him I knew about Mariella. I told him I knew about the Calabrian property. I told him I had been learning Italian for 6 years. I said all of this in Italian, slowly. And I watched his face do the thing it had never done in 29 years, of calm, patient explanations. I watched it lose its certainty. He started to speak. He shifted to Italian halfway through the first sentence. Whether out of habit or instinct or because he thought I had been bluffing, I do not know. I let him finish. And then I said, in Italian, that I understood him perfectly. He was quiet for a long time after that. There was no dramatic confrontation, no screaming. In some ways it would have been easier if there had been, because I think I had earned the right to some noise. But we were, after all, two people who had spent nearly 3 decades conducting our entire relationship at a reasonable indoor volume, and it turned out that even this could not make us loud. He asked me what I wanted. I said I wanted the house, my share of the retirement accounts, and an attorney's agreement in writing before I signed anything. He nodded. He called Concetta that night. I went upstairs and I did not listen. Not because I could not have, but because I had already heard enough, and there is a particular freedom in choosing not to. I want to talk about the year after, because I think it is the part that gets left out of stories like this. People want the confrontation, and then they want the triumphant new beginning, and what they do not want to hear about is the very ordinary, very exhausting, very quiet business of rebuilding a life in your early 60s. I was 62 by the time the divorce was finalized. I had not taught in a classroom in over 20 years. I had no active certifications, no recent professional references, and a resume that had a gap in it roughly the size of my entire adult life. I had the house, which I eventually decided to sell, because it turned out that the house I had thought was mine had always felt more like his. I had my share of the retirement accounts and a settlement that was fair if not generous, and I had a bank account in my own name, which I had opened 4 years earlier at a branch across town where nobody knew me. I moved into an apartment in East Nashville, a neighborhood that had changed considerably since I was young and was now full of young people doing things I did not entirely understand, but found energizing in the way that watching a river move is energizing. You are not in it, but you can feel the current from where you are standing. I contacted the Tennessee Department of Education about what it would take to reactivate a teaching license after a 23-year gap. The answer was complicated and involved coursework and a certification exam and a portfolio review, and when the woman on the phone said the word portfolio, I laughed. She asked me what was funny, and I said I was not sure, just that I had spent a very long time being told that going back would be too complicated, and it turned out that complicated was manageable when it was your own complication. I substitute taught for 8 months while I worked on the certification requirements. I stood in front of classrooms of 7-year-olds who could not have cared less about my complicated last 3 decades and who needed someone to explain why the silent E makes the other vowel say its name, and it turned out that I still knew how. 23 years away from the work and I still knew how. Some things wait for you. I got my license reinstated in the fall of 2018. I was hired at a school in Madison, just north of Nashville, by a principal who was 12 years younger than me and seemed mildly alarmed by my age and experience in equal measure. I did not tell her everything. I told her I had taken time away from teaching to raise my family and that I was ready to come back. She gave me a classroom full of 22 third graders and told me that the reading scores in the building were low and she needed someone who could help turn them around. I was 60 years old when I walked into that classroom for the first time, and I was 60 years old when I understood what had happened to my life, and I am 63 years old now as I am telling you this. I want to be precise about those numbers, because precision is how you know a story is real. Not the drama of it, not the confrontation or the twist or the satisfying ending, but the specific weight of specific years. My daughter called me the week I started back in the classroom. She had known most of the story by then. The version I had given her edited, the way you edit things for your children even when your children are adults. She asked me how it felt to be teaching again, and I told her it felt like finding a coat in the back of a closet that still fit perfectly. She laughed. She said, "Mom, that is the most you thing you have ever said." My son sent me a card. He is not a phone person and never has been, but he writes cards, long ones, full of thoughts he cannot seem to say out loud. The card said that he was proud of me and that he was sorry it had taken him so long to understand what our house had really been like, and that he wanted me to know he saw it now. I kept that card in the drawer of my nightstand for a long time. Concetta died in 2019, 2 years after the divorce. I sent flowers. I did not attend the service because my presence would not have been a comfort to anyone there, and I was done performing comfort I did not feel. But I sent flowers because she was the mother of my children's father, and because whatever she had taken from me, I no longer needed to take anything back. I was past the taking back part of things. I still speak Italian. I practice with Juliana, who retired from the community center but still meets me for coffee on the second Tuesday of every month at a cafe near her house. And we speak Italian for 90 minutes, and then switch to English, and she complains about her grandchildren, and I tell her about my students, and we split a pastry. It has become one of the best parts of my month. I want to say one more thing, and then I am done. There is a story that women like me are supposed to tell about women like me, and it is a story about wasted years and bitter lessons and the necessity of regret. I have heard it told many times. I have told parts of it myself in the difficult, scattered years when it was the only story I had available. But I have been a third-grade teacher long enough to know that the most important thing you teach a child is not any specific piece of knowledge. It is the understanding that not knowing something is not a permanent condition. It is a Tuesday, and on Wednesday there is a class, and on Thursday there is a practice session, and in 3 years you understand what you did not understand before, and the world that was closed to you opens. I spent 29 years in a marriage where my own understanding was managed for me, quietly and patiently, until I did not trust it anymore. And then I spent 6 years in secret recovering it, one verb conjugation at a time, in a folding chair under fluorescent lights, taught by a woman from Rome who was ruthless about my conjugations and who never once asked me why. At 52 years old, I needed so badly to learn how to understand what was being said in my own home. I was not too old. I was not too far gone. I was not too anything. I thought the door was locked. It was not locked. It was never locked. I had simply stopped reaching for it because I had been told so many times and so gently and so reasonably that there was nothing on the other side worth opening it for. There was everything on the other side. I have 22 third graders this year who are learning to read, and 2 of them are learning so slowly that some days I sit at my desk after they have all gone home and I worry. And some days one of them sounds out a word they could not sound out last week, and the look on their face is the same look it has always been. The same look I first saw in a classroom in Nashville in 1984. The same look that made me want to be a teacher in the first place. A look that says, "Oh, it was there the whole time. I just needed someone to show me how to see it." That is the only story I know how to tell. I have tried to tell it as precisely as I can.